Hey, what's up everybody? It's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're playing more of the dual casting seasonal event, which is an alternate game mode in which the first special card that we play every turn gets played twice. That makes special spamming decks like this Scoia'tael Symbiosis deck especially powerful, so let's go give it a look. So today we'll be playing a Scoia'tael Nature's Gift Symbiosis / Nature deck that focuses on playing as many nature cards as possible to spam as many Symbiosis procs as possible, spawning in a bunch of Wandering Treants and giving us a bunch of additional value. Of course, by playing nature cards twice as many times as usual, that is also going to be very effective in this event as well. Ideally, we start off with Aucwenn, because not only does she have Symbiosis, she also infuses all of our Naiads with the nature category, meaning they will also trigger our Symbiosis, so that just means even more Treants for us. So we use her, and then we have a whole bunch of other nature cards, basically all of the ones that we can spam in this deck. And so you could start using things like Dryad's Caress, things like Circle of Life, all of these ones that in some cases might not even seem like they're super valuable. Being able to play them twice is pretty incredible, especially once you get those Treants spawned in, and you can get some bonus effects like boosting up your Treants if you get the death blow there. So that's the basic idea, and you can also get some units that can give you access to even more special cards with things like the Sorceress, as well as Filavandrel, who, if you happen to get a hand boost on him, can be even more effective. And that is because you might be able to get a Bountiful Harvest out here, and if you can use two of those, then that also gives you a lot of long-term potential. So those are all the things you might consider using in round one, in addition to your actual Naiads that you just gave the nature tag through Aucwenn, like the Fledgling, and also like Pondkeeper, who can either give you even more Symbiosis or damage. We actually don't have that much Symbiosis in this deck, and the reason for that is almost any unit can get destroyed by a special card. So for the most part, rather than getting a bunch of vulnerable Symbiosis engines on the board, we get one or two, and mostly are just relying on getting the automatic one Symbiosis proc from our leader ability to get that bonus value from those Treants here. But then, by the time round 3 rolls around, because we do have Devotion in this deck, that means that Eithne will fully evolve, and she is an amazing Symbiosis engine, not only because she has Symbiosis 3, but also because that immunity means she is one of the few engines that is relatively safe from getting shut down, even in this event. So if you play her in round 3, then of course that means that using your nature cards at that point is far more effective, and so all those ones we were talking about earlier, you can certainly use those. Even Force Protector, assuming that you've played some nature cards in round 1 or round 2, you should have some stuff in your graveyard you can pull from with that. And then, of course, if you haven't used any of those other big cards, you can use those as well. Call the Forest is a big one, and technically if you can get this out earlier in round 1 or round 2, that is ideal. Then you get both Echoed Copies in round 2 or round 3, and that means lots and lots of boosts, in addition to, of course, the nature procs as well. Then, on top of that, we do have some tutors with Isengrim's Council, and potentially Fauve into Isengrim's Council, or a little more flexibility with your tutors when it comes to Call the Forest. Can use those to get some of your big cards, but we also have a big finisher with Harald Gord, so might want to save one of those to finish with Harald Gord on one of your last few turns and just make it hard for your opponent to answer him. But that's pretty much all there is to it. It is primarily just about spamming as many of those nature cards as you can and getting tons of value in the process. So let's go see it in action. Alright, so going up against Skellige here, and they'll go first. Okay, and so we have Aucwenn here, who is definitely a card that we like to have in round 1, so we can set up our Dryads for becoming nature cards in the future. We have a whole bunch of those in hand. That being said, they aren't necessarily the strongest cards in this deck, so let's try getting rid of some of those. And Harald Gord, if we had a way to tutor him, which we might with Call the Forest, although you could make a case that we'd prefer to get him with Isengrim's Council, as he is the only dwarf in this deck. Don't love seeing him in our hand in round 1, because obviously there's a card that we very much want to save for later. Might dump you as well. Okay, Eithne. Now that's another card we'd like to save. So those are basically the two best targets for Call the Forest, especially since we already had Aucwenn in hand. So this is a little tricky here. Good cards, yes, but in many cases cards that we very much need to save for later rounds and don't have much flexibility there, because Eithne is just objectively much weaker in round 1, whereas Gord, I guess there's a chance we play enough special cards that he could still be acceptable, but still probably not optimal in round 1. Alright, so this looks a whole lot like a Raids deck, which means they're going to have a lot of damage. They'd like to replay the Warlords as many times as possible before they start using those raids, though. But getting cards like Sorceress out safely, it's going to be very difficult to do. And there's a chance, even if we do start with Aucwenn here, which would normally be our leading card, they're just going to immediately answer her as well. And yes, her deployability is valuable, turning all of our Dryads in our deck into nature cards as well to give us more Symbiosis procs, but she does also give us Vitality on our Wandering Treants here, so there is still very much some value from her staying on the board. She also has Symbiosis, so bigger Treants in that way as well. So we're going to at least poke her, and that savagery is not quite enough. See if they go with a leader ability charge here. It's obviously overkill on the damage, but they might still think that's worth doing. Ooh, but they don't. And I'd argue that's a bit of a mistake. It's a little bit greedy there. I deliberately did use Aucwenn first because, as I was saying, the longer we wait, the more raid setup they're going to get. So this is the easiest time to play units that we want to keep on the board. So if we wanted to get Sorceress, this might also be the time to use her, but I think Sorceress is just going to be really tough overall in this match. We could perhaps go for something to boost up Aucwenn. I think that is almost certainly what we ought to do here. The question is more so, is it Dryad's Caress, or is it a Tempering even, which is better in terms of pure boosts? I think we might do that. Because, again, she has the Symbiosis. She also is giving us a little bit of extra vitality on our Treants. We don't have a lot of Symbiosis in our hand here, outside of Eithne, which, again, we very much want to save. But yeah, the Blood Eagle was going to come out eventually. These Treants are the perfect number for them to use, and, like we said, we know exactly what they intend to do. It's all about getting Warlords on the board as quickly as possible and replaying them as many times as possible, at least until they power up those raids, and then from then onwards, it's about spamming as many of those raids as possible, which they may start to do here after just a couple of Warlords. The goal was basically on that turn just to get Eithne big enough that stuff like this is still not big enough, but okay, this is what I think they should have done on the previous turn. Use the leader ability to get rid of Aucwenn, because now we have increased the amount of investment they needed to deal with her. So, I mean, they theoretically may eventually run out of raids cards, but until that happens, Sorceress, again, is very much a high-risk play. Otherwise, I mean, we could just drop a Dryad here and proc the Symbiosis for that, and then put the Sorceress next to her. This is in large part just because it's a low investment card to play. So I don't think they will... I mean, they shouldn't overreact to that, but we'll see if we can bait out some overcommitment here. And we do? Okay, so that's perfect, really. I think in all likelihood we are not trying to win round one. They're very likely going to try to bleed in round two, because that's what Gwent is nowadays, a 2-round game. But, in theory, the fundamentals would suggest that we ought to try to bait them into, again, using their highly valuable raids cards so that it is easier in round 2 and round 3 to play our better cards. Although, that being said, as we were identifying initially, don't have that many things that we are fond of playing here in round 1, since you're pretty much off limits, you're off limits, like to save that, don't have any targets for that, you're going to get immediately answered, no targets for this, so basically it's a question of doing Nature's Rebuke here, and destroy you two. And maybe get something in their graveyard for them to use Freya's Blessing to get back a Warlord. I guess we'll do it, in large part, just because they're good at dealing damage, but they aren't as good at putting up points. So that means that we don't have to put up that many points to at least remain within range here. Primal Savagery is in large part the one exception to that, and they've now used, I believe, both of their Primal Savageries, right? Should be 4 in their graveyard, because they're getting 2 of them every time they use it. Yeah. So that is usually a low damage, but high point value on their side card. But obviously once they power them up with the Warlords, then they're much easier to use, even from a damage standpoint. We might pass here. I think we probably do, because otherwise we'd likely be relying on Sorceress at this stage. Basically, it does demand an answer from them. They would very much need to... I guess we can do this and force them to play one more turn. Because I think with Sorceress, if they were to pass now, I think if they let us use Sorceress and also give us a start... Okay, well, now we're going to see. Is Sorceress enough for us to win a round with her? That is the question that we're going to have to answer. So the downside of this is using Sorceress now is going to give us a special card. We're going to get that special card duplicated. However, that means that any other special card we play on this turn is not getting duplicated. So that is an issue, because we are probably going to play another special card with whatever this other one was going to be. I think we are still going to use Sorceress, and Waylay is 6-point potential, whereas the others are generally 5. So I think that means that has to be the play. We don't have Dryad on the board. So I think we need to do this now. And now if we go with some leader ability charges, that ties us, this wins. Okay. So yeah, I think this is actually pretty valuable in that case. Being able to scrounge out a round 1 win. Didn't look that feasible, but we made it happen. Okay, so we did, of course, play one more card than our opponent, so that means we very well may choose to dry pass here. In fact, that is almost certainly what we ought to do. We have Eithne, and of course she will, by round 3, fully evolve because we have Devotion. Let's dump the Pondkeeper. That's not great. Fauve gives us some good flexibility. That could be either for Shaping Nature, which would have been great to have had in round 1, so we get both Echoed copies coming into round 2/3, or Isengrim's Council, which would give us a way to guarantee we have access to Harald Gord. Yeah, it's greedy, but I mean, because we have Fauve, we can, worst comes to worst, rely on Isengrim's Council to give us Gord. In fact, I'd argue that's still probably the right play. But I was trying to see if, maybe we can guarantee we get Filavandrel as well. In fact, our only 2 elves are the Sorceress and Filavandrel, so Isengrim's Council should see, I mean, because we're going to play twice, should see both Sorceress and Filavandrel. So I think we still dry pass here. But I like our setup going into round 3 for that reason. We, of course, still have some things we can fine-tune, but again, I think that round 1 win definitely helped us a lot. Okay, they're going to start with Freya's Blessing. This is going to be to get the Warlords back. That was one of the reasons why I was a little reluctant to go after them in round 1, because I suspected they might have been looking to do that in round 1, but it's round 2 instead, and that does give them a form of carryover. Alright, well now we draw into Filavandrel, so don't need to tutor him out. In fact, that would make Fauve into a Isengrim's Council significantly less. Well, one of them could be for Sorceress, one could be for Gord still, I suppose. That does mean if we're trying to use that as our way to get Sorceress, that we would need to do that on our second to last, not our last. Well, they were Sorceress. Okay, now, if we were to use that, we're getting you. We can't target humans with Isengrim's Council, so it would have to be a Pondkeeper, which is not amazing. I think we dump you. Okay, Abandoned Girl, we weren't going to be able to get. It is one of our weaker cards, but as I was saying before, there's some risk if you do choose Fauve for Isengrim's Council that you don't have enough targetable units remaining in your deck for that, so you need to be a little bit careful in that regard. Alright, they're going to load up the Raiders for some damage setup. Obviously, Eithne is our big engine for this round. For the most part, because of that immunity, she should be very difficult for them to answer. However, there are some raids, namely Delirium, that can still deal damage randomly split across a row, and that can hit through immunity. So the way we can dodge that is by having other cards on the board in that row when we have Eithne on the board. So if we played a little bit slow to start off, maybe initially with this Abandoned Girl, question here is going to be, are they going to overcommit to her? Because this is not a particularly powerful card. You would think it's not that threatening. I mean, they can destroy it with both Raiders, I suppose. That's probably the right move. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, they're going to do that at some point, of course, but would have liked for them to have either overcommitted, used one of their specials to go after her, or just left her there, and then it would have been much safer to use Eithne, because at that point, we would be feeling much more confident that even with I mean, even then, Delirium might still be able to, since they play twice, take her out. So, we of course have a lot of specials, or cards that give us specials, even if they're units. We'd like to have Eithne on the board before we do that, but that is the big risk, is if they have Delirium, they have what is more or less an immediate answer to Eithne. So, just looking at what our special cards in our graveyard are for the purpose of Force Protector, I think, given how many... either that or it's you, Pondkeepers. It might have to be Eithne. It's a little bit greedy. If we were playing it safe, we would have gone first into Call the Force and just gotten some stuff out here again. Make this row more crowded, make it much harder for, even with Delirium, for them to answer Eithne. If they don't have Delirium, she should be pretty safe. Okay, but Oniro scares me. That actually means they can only use one Delirium, though. Okay, they're going to go for weather effects. I mean, those can hit her, for what it's worth. Curious which one they go for. If they do that, plus Oniro into Delirium, then that could get very close. I think they went Frost to hit the highest one. That's not good for destroying cards. It's good for weakening, but if we eventually end up flooding that row with other things, then it's going to pretty much prevent them from destroying Eithne Sigvald. I will admit that is not necessarily a card I saw them using. Okay, so on one hand, the row effects... I mean, we're probably still going to flood this range row to further protect Eithne. And the fact that they had to use Oniro and still were not able to destroy Eithne suggests that she is pretty safe at this point. So, okay. In which case, we could even go with a Naiad Fledgling. That would give us some decent value long-term if we were to go Call the Forest there, and then I guess that would mean it'd have to be Pondkeeper for the other. Which is not ideal. Well, actually, no, tell you what, that is ideal. We do this. Fledgling. Put you here, at least for the time being, will give some additional vitality to Eithne. And we go here, we go ranged. And I'm deliberately going to turn you into Symbiosis Engine to make you a little more powerful. So now we have more Symbiosis on the board. We deliberately usually do not go for that much Symbiosis in this deck because no engine is safe, as we are about to see. By putting Symbiosis on that Fledgling, we have now invited them to go after it. Fair enough, we still got 5 vitality worth of value from it. And now they'll go after the Pondkeeper too. But one of the strengths we have here is that, yes, they have a lot of damage, but it is difficult for them to answer all of the trees that we are going to be getting out here. So, let's see. Now that we have you, we can be much more aggressive with using our specials. So we could have anything that we really want to get rid of that's an engine? Not really. Not really. So it's not as if we need to break out Force Protector for Nature's Rebuke right now. I think we hold off on that. Circle of Life could be useful in case we can set up Filavandrel to have anything that's in removal range. If we go double on Avallac'h, I think we do that. I mean, either of you, in fact, are great for getting hand buff. Force Protectors and Fauve are the cards we don't really care about. I think Filavandrel is more of a sure thing. By getting the extra base power on the boost on Filavandrel, that now makes it possible for us to get a Bountiful Harvest. The extra boost on Sorceress makes it harder for them to damage her below 4, and if she does get damaged below 4, then she can't use her order ability anymore, but basically, that's actually an extremely good play. They should have waited to do it. In fact, they rushed it a bit, but, ooh, that's a little scary. But this is why I was saying the Frost was not a great idea, because now we can put, if anything, they should have put the Fog, because now we put other stuff in here, and Eithne is not going to get targeted. So, I think we might even go Filavandrel here to see if we get any engines. So we want melee row, though, to get something equal to your provision cost. Because we want... I could go... No, we should go Bountiful Harvest. Nothing in its own row, right? These are all pretty terrible. Guess we'll go for the Sorceress boost here. Also, I think that is still the highest value. Ooh. Okay, so this is extremely dangerous, in fact. late enough in the round that I'm hoping we're still going to be okay with it, but this can very quickly fill an entire row, and when we're already filling rows with Wandering Tree Ants, that is a bit risky. So yeah, they're going to go after it, understandably. And the issue with that is, I mean, yes, that's potentially worth a lot of points, but you might run out of space before you can even get down your important cards, so you need to be mindful of that. But we did end up getting a boost on the Sorceress as well, so that theoretically could help a bit. But I'm also trying to take this a little bit slowly so that they blow through whatever specials they have. Their finisher is Bran, because they're doing a bunch of overkill damage with their raid card, so he's a relatively big point slam, really one of the only ones they have in their deck, in all likelihood. The Fauve, which is going to be to get... Gord is going to be one finisher, and I guess the... I mean, if we're going Pondkeeper for turning someone else into a Symbiosis engine, that is actually something we want to do kind of early. There's a case to be made for doing that now, in fact, because earlier the Symbiosis, the better. And normally, you kind of like to hide Gord, but he's not getting any bigger. He's already fully powered up here. So, I mean, yes, it does mean he obviously has a pretty big target on his back, but we know they have the damage. They're going to destroy stuff. Just a matter of what. And this means basically we're baiting out the control on Gord rather than Sorceress. Now, Sorceress should be comparatively safer. So yeah, that is definitely an earlier Gord than you usually play. So that is riskier, especially when we have last day. So we could have hidden him, but this is what I mean. Stunning Blow. I mean, that's huge overkill damage, though. So yeah, they're still not going for the high value, the efficient damage on Gord. They like the overkill damage to a certain extent to power up Bran, but not that much so. Alright, so now we could use Dryad's Caress. I think we want to do that because we will get the vitality from it. So that makes sense to build around that, use that early. This is what I was referring to, though. We get tons of those tree ants on the board, and if we're not careful, we can run out of space. So we're going to get them every time we play a special, and even our units are going to give us those specials. Sorceress we can't play in our last turn, so we want to have time for that order ability, so she's either going to come up next or on the turn afterward, and might just finish with Dryad's Caress. Actually, no, we shouldn't do that. This Vitality's not going to have enough time. So I guess it's Dryad's Caress here. We're going to steal the Pondkeeper and Filavandrel. Okay, well, that is the card that we put the Symbiosis on. Couldn't use Dryad's Caress on him to boost him up, because otherwise he would have been purified and lots of Symbiosis infusion. So, I mean, we could have used Leader Ability, but even then he still would have been small enough they could have stolen him. So, that was one of their big control cards. It does give us more room, which, again, is not a terrible thing. So, I think we were saying it is Dryad's Caress here. Now, next turn has to be Sorceress. Otherwise, we're not going to have time for her. We should go Leader Ability on our next turn as well. And then Finisher is going to be Force Protector. Their last card, again, is going to be Bran. It might be, have they used their Blood Eagle yet in this round? Because that might be their plan for how to get him out. Okay, so that's, remember, only based on the base power, that Rupture, so that's 3 damage. In fact, I mean, that might still be their best, that is their best option, in fact. Fauve is a 2, where all these are 1s, and they can't target Eithne. So that suggests that they don't have much control left. I still think they probably have, well, they might have had an answer for our Sorceress, but they realize there's just no way they can catch us at this point, and so they forfeit. Alright, so going up against Nilfgaard here, and they'll go first. Okay, so we have Aucwenn, which is probably good to have in round 1, but not that much in the way of control. Might want to try to... Okay, we do have at least 1 Circle of Life, and obviously this Nature's Rebuke, so it's a little bit better than I was giving it credit for. Might get some of that from Filavandrel, but let's get rid of the Abandoned Girl. Force Protector might be a way to replay some of those stronger nature cards, so this could work. We'll try it out. They'll start with Glynis. Now, that's obviously a card we want to immediately answer. Otherwise, she will get huge. One of the downsides of this deck is, ideally, we would get as many Symbiosis units on the board as quickly as possible, so that whenever we do play our nature cards, we get as much value as possible out of the tree ants. However, if our opponent plays a card early that we very much want to answer with a nature card, obviously, we're going to do that to get rid of Glynis. On the other hand, that means we're not getting as much Symbiosis value as we might have otherwise liked. technically speaking, we could have and arguably should have even Circle of Life there, although given how we have Force Protector, we can, of course, replay the card that we just played, if necessary. Let's see what they go for here. Right, Knife Juggler is not an issue at all. We don't really care if we lose these Wandering Treants. And that's not something that we need to immediately answer either, right? Cantarella. So they are just RNGing and striking out. I mean, they'll probably try to give this Symbiosis, although, I mean, there's a chance they might be able to get some other nature cards from us. It's not completely out of the question, but this very much looks like a good opportunity for us to start going with Aucwenn, so that way we do have much better Symbiosis synergies, and all of our Naiads become more powerful as well. Obviously, we just lost one, but more to come. Yeah, one would assume they're about to coup Cantarella. No Biting Frost. Okay, that, I will admit, I'm a little bit surprised to see. Alright, so now, we could Circle of Life, remove you, and get the hand buff on Filavandrel would be kind of nice, and then just hit you and get the hand buff on a random unit. Otherwise, yeah, we don't have much in the way of Symbiosis engines outside of just Aucwenn, so I think we might just be looking to do that. Let's boost you. And now our Treants are at least a little bit stronger. And the random boost goes on the Pondkeeper. Sure. Alright, Mage Torture, that's also a threat. So that does have Assimilate, so we would like to get rid of that. So we could either go for a Force Protector to replay either a Circle of Life or a Nature's Rebuke. Either one has sufficient damage. In fact, Nature's Rebuke could destroy both of these, which would be kind of nice. Otherwise, go for more hand buff, at least when we take you out. Although, 6 is really a good point for us to be here. I think we might not need to go much beyond that. Or we go Filavandrel and just see what we get here. I think we go Force Protector. We'll go for more the sure thing. Let's go Nature's Rebuke. It's a little bit overkill damage on you. But I think it's, you know, getting the buff on our Wandering Treants is certainly not bad. And we still have the flexibility of knowing we can lean on Filavandrel later. And by putting this in the range row, it means, hopefully, Aucwenn can hold on for slightly longer. We'll see what they're doing with Menno, though. This would be coup, yeah. Understandable. Dishonorable, but understandable. Because they can do it twice. Now, are they an actual dedicated mill deck? That remains to be seen. Right, they're going to, once again, take Naiads, which are not terribly effective for them in a vacuum. We do lose Aucwenn. That does stink, because she was our primary Symbiosis source at that stage. And neither of these are particularly big threats. So, thinking we don't do too much. I mean, technically, we actually could have Dryad's Caressed on Cantarella if we were really concerned about them doing what they just did. Granted, their random RNG dice roll with coup did not really work out either way, so it doesn't make that much of a difference, but maybe we will. But we don't have a Naiad / Dryad on the board to power up Nature's Caress. So yeah, we'll go with the Fledgling. Largely because we have a big lead right now, so it's not a huge deal. And by powering up this Treant at least a little bit, that means that Pondkeeper now has a little more power. This could be a way to get another Symbiosis card on the board, but if we are going to go that route, we'd ideally like to do that near the beginning of the round, and it is starting to get fairly late in the round, so that's one of the reasons why I'm hesitating a little bit to do that. They go Leader ability, though, so they're at least investing a little bit. Going for the Runestone, which would normally be for Assimilate procs, but we've gotten rid of all of their Symbiosis, or rather all their Assimilate engines thus far. They did use Leader ability this turn. That, we should at least be able to get rid of the armor if we are to go Pondkeeper, right? Go Melee Row, I mean, we could just go for 1 damage and get rid of your armor. Or we could go for you and deal 3 damage and almost, but not quite destroy you. Debatable. Otherwise, Filavandrel, I'd like to go for Shaping Nature. Do we have other units in our hand? We do. We could go Filavandrel here. I'd kind of like to save him because he is arguably our biggest card that we have remaining. So maybe we just answer you as quickly as possible. Alright, Imperial Diplomacy. Again, clearly they're an Assimilate deck. These are all cards that would normally be here to proc as many Assimilate boosts as possible, but since we've gotten rid of all their Assimilate engines, they're not nearly as threatening. Giant Slayer. At this point, we would be fairly hard-pressed to destroy him. Waylay's not terrible. Should probably go for the Fledgling. Well, debatable. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, they're trying to get the death blow to get the resilience here by going after the Pondkeeper. We could Dryad's Caress, and probably should Dryad's Caress right here. In fact, it's probably all we need, or Tempering, but we do have some Dryads on the board, so why not go this route? And as I was saying, technically speaking, you can Purify Cantrell to get rid of the Disloyal, so we could have stopped the coup if we really wanted to. It wasn't really a huge deal. They are going to continue to hit this Pondkeeper, but I don't want to load up on too much Vitality there. Also, we actually removed the Vitality that we currently have. Let's go for you. And at this point, I think we might just absorb that Vitality there. Because I don't think this round is going to go for that much longer. They're going to Heat Wave. Okay, we did start to boost up a bit. Fair enough. But I would still argue Heat Waving 4 provision costs or 1/5 provision cost card is generally not great value. And we can... we don't have any more Dryads, unfortunately. So, yeah, now this Dryad's Caress is definitely weaker than Tempering would be. So I think we do go the Tempering route. Which will still be enough for us to retake the lead here. At least should be. So this is not great. As I said, rather not have to play Filavandrel, but at this point, we've made matters very difficult for them. And so they pass, and we'll take the round 1 win. Uneven. Okay, so we won on even cards in round 1. That means we could either push here in round 2, and they have to keep pace with us. If they don't, then we just pass, and there'll be a card down in round 3. Or we try to push 2-0. Or we could just say, pass right now, dry pass in this round, and they'll have to play something to win this round, otherwise we just win automatically, giving us guaranteed card advantage going into round 3. I'm kind of tempted to go that route. I think we might go that route here. And these are obviously, I think we might dump Dryad's Caress just because we don't have, ooh. That's tempting, though. That is a little bit tempting, though. That is a little bit tempting, though. Because then we can get both echoed copies for round 3. Tell you what we're going to do. We are going to push. At least a tiny bit. We're going to go Melee Row Filavandrel. Unfortunately, no Symbiosis on the board, but we are going to get at least a little bit from our leader ability there. Then, this is mostly just to do this. And we would like... I mean, either way, it's going to be a Sorceress. Let's see. Don't control an artifact. So we'll go here, Melee Row. Then go again. Nothing to hit. We can go Range Row, I guess. Boost you up. Yeah, I might have actually wanted to try to split those boosts across the Sorceresses to make them a little bit harder to answer. So they're going to have to Onira. They need to catch us on this turn. If they don't put up 18 points, then we can just immediately pass, and they'll be forced to go a card down in round 3. That remains a threat, but we have gotten some carryover from the hand buff, and now we also... Okay, Joachim is where they're getting the big points. Let's see what this amounts to. Okay, Xavier actually is a problem, because the other reason why I was thinking about pushing in this round was because I wanted to play Shaping Nature so that we would get the 2 copies going into the next round. Since we play 2 copies here, we get both echoed copies in round 3. They can only remove 1 from our graveyard with Xavier here. So that is still, technically, we could get 1 echoed copy in round 3. That's an option, but they have not caught us. So we could still pass here, force them to go a card down, and make matters really difficult for them. Or we could go Shaping Nature, which is really good tempo at this stage. They are almost certainly going to coup Joachim, though, which is very powerful. So maybe we just let them do that as their round 2 finisher. Or make them have to play coup in round 3 when they don't have as good of an option to target. Could go Filavandrel as well, but yeah, here's the obvious play. So I think it makes sense for us to have passed here. They will go a card down. They're getting good value out of coup here, of course, but basically we're saying we don't care. We're letting you win this round. Only thing that could have made it decent would have been if they got some extra carryover from Filavandrel, but I don't think they can on just 4 provision specials from him, right? It's not like our 6 provision specials. Alright, so they'll win round 2, but they go a card down to do it. And now, some of our cards have disappeared, but this is Circle of Life, and that is Sorceress of Dol Blathanna. That's our boosted one. We draw into Call the Force, and we also get a Bountiful Harvest here. Isengrim's Council could be a way to get Harald Gord, or either Eithne or Fauve. I don't have much for Fauve to get at this point, but basically, I mean, this gives us a ton of flexibility here. We want to get Eithne quickly. In fact, we'll actually go Shaping Nature, or rather, Call the Force into Eithne at the beginning, and then Call the Force, I guess, into Abandoned Girl, because we're going to get Fauve and Harald Gord from the Isengrim's Council. So we basically perfect consistency from our deck. They will go first. We'll have double last say here. If they start doing mill stuff at this stage, we saw a little bit of that with Cantarella. Then that could get a little bit problematic because, of course, we have Eithne hanging out in our deck. So if they get rid of her, then that could be perhaps the biggest issue. It's Oniro into Johnny. Okay, so we could immediately answer him. Obviously, he's going to give them damage. Nazca Sergeant is going to get them a lot of boost. They might even put those on Johnny, even though he's not a soldier, just to make it harder for us to remove him. Okay, honestly, that makes it easier for us to decide what we want to do here. Because if they didn't put that on Johnny, then I would say we might be able to justify going double Circle of Life on him. But since he is now out of removal range, at least in the short term, I think it makes sense for us to go with our original plan, which was going to be Call the Forest initially into Eithne. That gives us great Symbiosis setup. And then she's also immune, so that makes it very tough for them to do anything about her. We still have Isengrim's Council, which can give us either of these two. It cannot give us Abandoned Girl. So we go Abandoned Girl here. Not usually as powerful, but put it on a row with Eithne and it's not bad. And Johnny will, of course, start to hit a bunch of cards. But now that we have a bunch of things on the board here, it is much harder for them to hit the stuff that really matters. That has Assimilate, which means that is potentially something worth targeting. But yeah, you had to think when they played the Johnny that it wasn't just a simple, we're going to play one special card from the hand and assume that's going to be enough to get the job done. You had to assume they had things like Rune Mage, units that were give them even more special cards. Okay, unfortunately we lose the Abandoned Girl, don't get the chance to convert it into another one of our Dryads. Coup de grace on congratulations, you're getting a Wandering Treant. But it does proc the Assimilate. That is the issue. That is the threat. So this, again, is going to be to go into Gord, which is fully powered up, and Fauve, which is just going to be to get another Dryad's Caress or Tempering. So what is our priority here? If we could get you into removal range, that would be great, but I don't really think that we can. And this looks like at this stage is going to be all the Symbiosis we're going to get here. Because our other Symbiosis would have been the engine that they just got rid of. So maybe we go Bountiful Harvest, see if we can get some engines here. Like a Sorceress would be fantastic. And now we might move the Sorceress here to give her a boost. I know the Sword Elf gives us more damage over the long term, but getting a boost on Sorceress just makes her much harder for them to do something about. Granted, they have to lock her. They can't really do much with the second one. They get a little bit of extra value from removing the boost we had already. But now that means these other Sorceresses should be much, much safer. So I do like that. I do like that. And I think we go into this because the ideal way to play would be one special card per turn. One special card per turn. I think we might even put the Vitality on it. That's maybe asking for trouble. But because you only get the first special card that you play on your turn duplicated, that means if we are going to play Sorceress... Okay, that also just doesn't work with a 1-power Sorceress. And that was extremely lucky that hit Johnny, but that's why I wanted to boost the Sorceresses. Also incredibly lucky. Okay, granted that would have been a reason for our leader ability, but didn't think that they were going to get a 1 in 6 chance to proc twice in a row, which, can do the math, but is incredibly low. So now this is going to be a weaker special, unfortunately. But what I was saying before, you want to try to play just one special card from hand per turn if possible, which is why I'm going to go with the other Sorceress here, because now we use this Sorceress. Yes, we could wait another turn to get a stronger special, but the reason why we're doing this now is, I mean, we could, tempering her, which is not bad, but also Waylay is not bad either. They have good target, I mean, potentially brings Johnny into removal range. And we don't have anything to hand buff, though. Don't have anything to hand buff with the Circle of Life anymore, so it's not really a huge deal. So, I did that now, even though we had a weaker Sorceress, which meant theoretically a weaker special card. Now they're going to steal this. Fair enough. Because we were going to use that Sorceress, and with that Sorceress we were going to get a special card, and we were also going to play a special card from our hand, which meant that across all those things we were going to have multiple special cards we were trying to play on the same turn. We were only going to get the extra special card from the first one we did. So for the most part, you want to use the Sorceress order ability when you are just playing unit from hand, if possible. But now, let's see, Shaping Nature, it might be time to break that out. They have one card left here. I think, no, let's save our big stuff. That means we're just going to go for the pure boost there, I think. Let's save our big stuff, and let's just go... I'm a little concerned that they end up boosting the Sorceresses and actually make those orders usable, but let's just hit you. And let's make sure we have enough time for the Vitality to actually kick in here. So this way, we make it much harder for them to do anything with the big cards we create from these, and we're just forcing them to use Coup on Treants or whatever else, and not really getting any extra value out of that. So they're in the lead at the moment, but of course we have 2 more cards, and we have 2 very big cards at that. So basically, we just go, and single one of these should be sufficient. As I was saying, these are the only 2 cards we're going to be able to get out from our deck right now. They're the only 2 units we have, but they realize there is no way that they can stop us at this point, and so they forfeit. So there's a look at the Scoia'tael Symbiosis deck for the new dual casting seasonal event. If you liked the video, then make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and leave a comment down below to let me know which other cards, archetypes, and factions we should experiment with next. And take a look at our dual casting playlist to see previous dual casting decks that we've used as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.